This is going to be a contemplation on alien abduction and what has happened to me over many years, the last few years. I would like to go back quite a ways to start my story so that you get a very relinquishing fact toward exactly what happened to me and what led up to what happened to me and what it's like to be abducted by aliens in the real sense of life compared to all these stories that you hear cast about on the internet. In the early 90s, I had started working for a company called Chevron. In a short amount of time, in leaps and bounds, I reached a high position in Chevron management. When I did, I accelerated so quickly that most of the townspeople loved me. There was very few that didn't. I had tons of customers and people who came to see me on a daily basis, of course, to buy gas off of me because I was in higher management, and people just loved to come and talk to me because I always had things to say. Well, shortly thereafter, let me say this. Shortly thereafter, I went to work for Chevron. I became very inquisitive toward the fact that many things happen in the world and none of us know the reason why. And it intrigued me in such a way that I would work all day and I would come home in the afternoons and I would study half the night. What was my study? Well, I studied particular things that most people aren't aware of. My first study delved into a committee, and the committee was called the Committee of 300. Well, one intriguing thing in my study of the Committee of 300 was that, lo and behold, I found my main boss's name on the list for the Committee of 300, which I thought was extremely odd. This committee meets across the ocean from where I live in another country, and it meets once every 3 years. Today, I'm not sure exactly how much the Committee of 300 meets or if it even exists, but I'm positive that in the early to mid-90s, it did exist. So in my study of the Committee of 300 and him being on the roster of the committee, I began to relinquish to some of my higher, we'll say, supervisors that I had found his name on the Committee of 300. And they told me straight out that yes, he was one, well, we'll say one, not they. One told me that yes, he was on the Committee of 300. Now, since this is really not about the Committee of 300, I'll let you all do your own research into the fact of the Committee of 300. But what I'm trying to get at here is that my mind became so inquisitive toward the facts of the truth. And in my study of the Committee of 300, it led me over into other things like, we're going to say, Masons and the Illuminati and so-called today the Bilderberg Group. But let's go back to the Masons. In my town, there were many Masons, and still are. And I found out that for things to happen in my town, nothing happened practically without going to see my boss. The Masons would go see my boss. The town elected officials would go see my boss before someone was elected. Man, what turmoil. You wouldn't believe it. It really blew me away. I would go into the office some days and it would be full of the townspeople. 4 or 5 of the most, we'll say, higher prominent figures in town that you didn't see a lot. And then other figures like mayors, judges, and on and on. So in this time, we'll say that I knew that there was something else going on. Many things going on. One day my boss told me straight up, he said, "Sir," he said, "there will be 6 lanes on this highway in an amount of a couple of years." And I believed him. I had no reason to doubt him, but I thought that that was really uncanny. So I began to understand that there are things that none of us are supposed to know. That's the only way to say it, because they hide those things. When I say they, I mean people to whom was like my boss, who hid the fact that he was in debts with all the higher officials that were elected in my town. And not only that, he came to me one day and I merely walked into the office and he told me, he said, "Our next governor will be X and X." And I had no reason to doubt him whatsoever. And within a year, that was the governor of our state. Now, you can all take this for what it is, because you'll have to go on your own assumptions, of course, toward everything I'm saying. But the thing is I'm trying to get to you what led me to know that there's a lot more in this world than any of us have ever perceived. Much more. At the end of my study, we'll say, of the Committee of 300, and I had begun to study all of these groups, it all led me down a road to the one thing, and which was UFOs. UFOs being seen all over the world and have been for years. So my study went in depth. It went in depth so much that I spent practically day and night either reading or studying and working. That's what I did. Most people didn't believe what I had to say when I told a little story about what I knew or what I believed. So in the later 90s, after all my in-depth study into all these subjects, of course I also studied the facts of evil, because so many people cast so many things of evil on UFOs. And in this time, I began to have experiences that are very hard to explain. It would be like a feeling of pressure and maybe a particular smell of something burning, maybe almost electrical. And I have had experiences so strong that I have seen doorways open in rooms with no doors. And I have seen things look through those doorways at me while I was being frozen and couldn't move anything but my eyes. Maybe I can elaborate and explain on this thing. We'll say in the late 90s, I had a family friend and his family who had come over one day. We were having a great discussion in the living room when all of a sudden I had this feeling, this aura, this undoubtable feeling. And when I had this feeling, time stopped. And none of us could move, not even the children. But I could see a doorway behind them all opening up, and I could see something peering through the doorway at me. And just that quick, the doorway closed and it was gone. And the event was over. And my friends were completely freaked out. We had lost about 10 minutes in a room together. So, bad enough, my friends didn't come over much anymore. They knew of my study and what I studied, and people are just scared when you get into things that are out of bounds compared to daily life. It seems that the world worries about money, that's the most important thing in the world is money. But you see, money was never the most important thing in the world to me. It seemed like money was always kind of on the back burner, or taboo, we'll say, that I could make a lot or I could make a little and be just as happy either way. But we all know that we need money to survive. After these events occurred, I was at work one day, and with many people in the room, me and two other fellows was talking about UFOs and aliens, and I was instilling in them what I knew about UFOs and aliens. One of my cashiers was running a register when out of nowhere a small blue